Good afternoon, everyone. Quick look at where the markets closed the trading day today, and it was a little bit of a mixed picture with the TSX down by about 117 points. Also some weakness in the S&P as well as the NASDAQ. But the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed at a new record high once again, driven by shares of Chevron up 3% and Verizon up by 5%. On news that Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway has increased his stake in both of these companies. Now, you'll learn about this through what's called the 13F filings with the SEC, which is a requirement for all institutions that manage more than $100 million to present their holdings on a quarterly basis. And some individual investors call that the smart money and piggyback off of those trades. So just something to be mindful of in terms of how people get their investment ideas. Away from that, though, the big market story continues to be the rate debate. We talked a little bit yesterday about the U.S. 10-year yield increasing, moving above that 1.3% mark. And that's causing some downward pressure on valuations and multiples. And also the bears will say that you can't have rates rising and equity markets also moving at the same time, that there is going to be a readjustment in terms of some of those higher multiple areas of the market like tech. So you did see a bit of weakness in tech stocks today, and in particular Apple. Away from that, you saw the US dollar higher versus most major currencies. The Canadian dollar traded a little bit lower today. Oil pretty much unchanged for most of the day, but keep in mind that we've seen a huge move in the price of WTI at that $61 mark. And of course, we've also, with respect to the commodity complex, an 8% move in copper on a year-to-date basis. So what's all that telling you? It's kind of telling you that the reflation trade is working. Reflation means you want to own some of the commodities as well as the financial stocks. And that's really what we're seeing do quite well. Here in Canada, interestingly to note, the volumes for the energy sector, the XEG is what I look at. I've mentioned that to you in the past. We're up by 34% today. And the financials, the XFN, those volumes up by 67%. In other words, people are really buying into that reflation trade. Away from that, I'd also just point out that Bitcoin was up once again, hitting 51,000. Remember, it was just yesterday that we had breaking news that it hit 50,000. So there's still quite a bit of interest, obviously, in the Bitcoin or cryptocurrency space. I'm going to have a guest for you on that next week. Now, away from that, I have to point out that there was economic data that really surprised the upside in the United States. Retail sales, a huge beat, 5.3%. Versus a 1% expectations. Now, remember yesterday we talked about strategists commenting that there's $1.5 trillion in household savings and expect that number to increase. So that's where, people are obviously taking a look at some of the retail stocks. PPI, so an inflation mark, also came in at the highest level we've seen since 2009. Again, that kind of goes back to that reflation trade or owning some commodities. Industrial production also beat expectations, and also some positive news in terms of the home builder sentiment. So some of that economic data looks to be actually quite strong. Away from that, a couple of stocks to mention as well. Shopify, their earnings did come out. The stock was down by about 7%. Good earnings, but the company management indicated that, yes, they'll see good revenue growth in 2021, but not as strong, perhaps, or as accelerating at the same pace as we saw in 2020. Interestingly, though, the fact that that stock was down 7% but closed the day down 2.5% tells you that people still want to own it. Away from that, I'd also just mention BMO got an upgrade over at Scotia, setting that stock up by 1%, so that was a nice outperformer. Also, Canada Goose got a buy rating over at William O'Neill, so that stock was up by 1.3%. In terms of some of the leaders on the TSX, Constellation Software, we saw that stock strong on the back of their earnings yesterday. A&W royalties also up nicely, and also Canadian Tire. So you are seeing some discretionary names here in Canada do well. In addition to the banks, I'd also point out that some of the asset managers in Canada are also starting to shine. So some moves into those names as well. And as I mentioned, in terms of the downtick on the TSX, some of the industrials were weak, like CP, Franco-Nevada. So some of the precious metals were also weak, and Shopify as well, and also the weed stocks. I'll leave it there. We'll see you back here tomorrow.